I think we're telling a story now that really kind of highlights why life science in particular as a sector is worth investing in. If you looked at it about 10 years ago, for every venture dollar invested in life sciences in Canada, there was about $40 created in the US. Now where we're at today, for every dollar, there's $100 in the US.
I thought you were going to say the opposite there.
You know, despite life sciences kind of being in this, 15 to 20% of VC allocation, certainly in Canada, the data shows that we've driven the majority of liquidity for venture investment.
Hello and welcome to Leading Beyond the Lab. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Nikhil Thatte, partner of Lumira Ventures, a leading Canadian life sciences VC company focusing on investing across the North American region. So the liquidity returned in life sciences is higher than tech.
Absolutely. Wow. This year will actually be the most significant amount of liquidity ever in our history. One of our biggest exits ever, a company called Histosonics. They completed a landmark clinical study called the Hope for Liver study, bringing new hope for patients with liver cancer. It's pretty remarkable technology where they get the histotripsy treatment and sometimes able to go home to their families that evening. It's not every modality that we're going to have a company that's best in class in Canada, but you are certainly going to find companies in specific areas that are going to punch above their own weight. We have a gene editing company out of Toronto that frankly we believe is the most advanced editing platform in the industry. I recognize that is a huge statement to make.
And I suppose to wrap things up, the other initiative that I found in my research was the 50 million co-investment vehicle. Tell me more about that.
Haven't announced it formally yet, but
you heard it here first. Hello and welcome to Leading Beyond the Lab. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Nikhil Thatte, partner of Lumira Ventures, a leading Canadian life sciences VC company focusing on investing across the North American region. Nikhil focuses on backing cutting-edge science and breakthrough therapeutic platforms, things like gene editing, gene therapy, but also spins on traditional modalities in and around oncology, immunology, and the cardiometabolic disease space. Lumira Ventures has also had a number of recent exit successes with the likes of Endotronix and Histosonics, and it's close to its first close of Fund 5 by the end of the calendar year. There are also a number of other initiatives. There's the Cancer Breakthrough Fund in partnership with the Terry Fox Foundation, the setting up of its Australia strategy, and the setting up of its 50 million co-investment fund with a global investment manager. Nikhil's journey brings together a number of different things: his healthcare and royalty experience, his professional background and personal life experience from being in venture, but also his innate belief in Canada's ability to build healthcare companies globally that matter. Thank you so much for joining me here today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been an exciting week at London Life Sciences Week here, so great to be with you.
How you finding Jefferies?
It's been fun. It's more relaxed. JP Morgan is what kind of word on the street.
Yeah. I have heard actually.
Yeah.
I have to apologise. I don't know if you've seen many Movember moustaches.
No, yours looks great.
Yours looks great.
I'm
not sure great.
My
wife
should be
wouldn't
on
agree.
Mine, but
so I'd like to get this started, Nikhil, by hearing in your own words what you believe to be Lumira Ventures' mission in backing breakthrough science in the next generation of biotechs and medtech companies.
Sure, it's actually quite straightforward. So our mission is really to back mission-driven entrepreneurs and management teams building transformative biotech and medtech companies with the goal of generating top quartile strong returns for our LPs. While also impacting patients in need. And we've done that now over multiple cycles. So really, really proud of our franchise.
Yeah, there's some real achievements and momentum building this year.
Yeah, definitely. So we've actually had our most successful year. Had a couple of exits. You mentioned a couple of them. So Endotronix earlier this year, a company in the remote cardiac monitoring space out of Illinois. But one of our biggest exits ever, a company called Histosonics. So we co-led the Series C about 6 years ago, around actually the time that I joined Lumira. Have really just seen kind of, the company evolve. They completed a landmark clinical study called the Hope for Liver study, bringing, new hope for patients with liver cancer. What the technology is essentially a non-invasive tumor ablative medical device, essentially delivering high-frequency ultrasound to liquefy tumors. So it's pretty remarkable technology where patients sort of come in. They get the histotripsy treatment, and they're sometimes able to go home to their families that evening, having had their tumors ablated. And so, certainly, extremely broad potential, paradigm changing for oncology, not just liver cancer, but many cancers, and certainly we feel that there's potential beyond cancer, but. Seeing the progress of that company, and this summer they announced a transformative transaction whereby essentially a new set of investors came in and acquired a significant portion of the company. So for existing investors like us, we got significant liquidity, so much so that we actually returned a previous fund off of that exit. But the great thing about this transaction is that we actually retained a significant portion as well of our holding, which we and investors who come in presumably believe could potentially return our fund again. And so just a bit of a unique structure, unique transaction, but sort of the best of both worlds for us, where we have liquidity for our LPs, but we still get to continue participating in the upside. So that's probably our one of our biggest wins. I think we've actually had. So we've returned capital to our LPs in 19 of the 20 years that we've been around, and this year will actually be the most significant amount of liquidity ever in our history. So wow. At a time when actually a lot of VCs may be struggling, and actually life sciences has been a bright spot for VC generally, and we try to tell that story of why life science investing and VC investing in life science is worth it. But I think certainly we've had just one of our most successful years ever. So quite excited about that, and really good timing as we're really now fundraising in earnest for Fund 5.
And perfect place as well with Jefferies here and JPM around the corner.
Exactly, yeah. So really here kind of trying to fill up our pipeline of new deal flow for Fund 5, and obviously talking with our co-investors and pharma about our companies that are raising and opportunities that they're looking at, and what's around the corner. Like, that's why it's worth it to come to these kinds of things. So.
And as you kind of approach the close of your first close of Fund 5, what do you think is driving LP conviction in this cycle?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I think, first of all, track record and performance is really driving the interest right now, as now we've shown over multiple cycles, again, our ability to generate a great return. And again, the impact story for patients is we've done that again for the last 20 years. So that's really the piece that resonates and that gets you in the door. I think as it relates to life sciences, though, I think we're telling a story now that really kind of highlights why life science in particular as a sector is worth investing in. And so the data that we present, this is certainly true in Canada, but also in the US and Europe, we've done the similar analysis that shows that, despite life sciences kind of being in this, 15 to 20% of VC allocation, certainly in Canada, the data shows that we've driven the majority of liquidity for venture investment across all sectors. So despite, markups for AI.
Do you know what it is in America? Or
we actually have run the analysis. I don't know off the top of my head, but it is actually quite sizable.
So the liquidity returned in life sciences is higher than tech, for example.
It absolutely. Wow. So the numbers in Canada have been 18% of VC dollars in the last 5 years have gone into life sciences, and of that, we've calculated that about 56% of liquidity has been driven by our sector, and so that's a very easy story to tell, particularly Canadian potential LPs who want to engage in the space. The tricky part about it is that it's hard to communicate, especially. So 75% of what we do is traditional biotech. The other 25% is medtech. But it's hard to tell an LP just off, or at least you're starting the conversation with an LP saying, hey, we may enter and exit our companies without them having, generated a single dollar in revenue. It's a bit of a hard concept to comprehend. It's just odd because, they're used to, multiples and ARR off of, SaaS revenue and all of that. That's like what they understand. It's hard to, conceptualize what that means when someone says, hey, like we're going to exit a company in phase 2 for multi-billion dollars. So you kind of got to take them through that journey and show them the case studies that we've had and the success stories that we've had. Again, that's where track record really comes in handy. But yeah, I think that's really driving interest, and just the data. It speaks for itself.
Yeah, and when you look at or evaluate a deal opportunity, what do you think are the differentiators that you drill down into?
Yeah, I mean, right now, look, it's always technology is number one. There's got to be something there, but one of the first things now we just go to, especially in these market conditions, is just what sort of valuation can I get, what structure, and how quickly can I get to a potential exit. There's a lot of success stories happening right now, like fantastic returns, like multi-billion-dollar exits, and certainly this last year has been really incredible for biotech liquidity. However, once you go into it a little bit more, there are really different returns depending on where the investors actually entered and at what time they picked to actually get into the story.
As in the valuation size or the risk of it not going
it's a little bit of both, because really what's happened is that some of these early investors that may have been part of the stories 10, 15 years ago when the company, was formed, they may not be getting the value of some of these transactions that are actually occurring now. So this is really about, picking the right time to enter companies. And so just the investment thesis, really from just a money in, money out, returns IRR, all of that just has to make sense now. There has to be a very clear path to liquidity or a real path to exit.
I've seen that as well.
Yeah, and I think now it's, really where the market is, clinical data drives everything. Where 2021 it was, you can get by selling a vision, and the potential of a technology, and that got you a valuation billion plus sometimes of just selling the potential of a new modality or new technology. You need to prove it these days. But the good news is we are seeing that, hey, when companies execute on what they promised, they generate the data, they are seeing real valuation flexing, and they're seeing exits because pharma needs to acquire them.
And when you say data, does it have to be clinical data, or are the days of the academic spin-off early stage company with an asset that they want to get into the clinic? Is it dead? Is it changing? What's the future of that landscape, do you think?
It's harder. I will say, those deals certainly still they're happening all the time. But they're happening like, $100 million Series A kind of they're funded all the way through clinical data right from the get-go. So there's no financing overhang, and that they're going to get to what's going to be a value inflecting milestone. And so that said, convincing people of those stories right now, it's usually you're a been there, done that entrepreneur that's done it in the past, and you have conviction on something new. You're also getting those at incredible valuations for investors as well. So rarely, it's a pre-money valuation of, rarely is it more than 20 or 30.
Yeah.
And so, really investors are benefiting from a very attractive valuation or post-money that they are up against just in terms of the exit. And so the other element too is that now we're also, obviously the topic of the year has been China in licensing. And so now you're actually able to get assets quite cheap from China. And, people talk about this, hey, it's all these Me Too assets, but that's actually slowly changing. China is innovating. They are innovating with products that are quite novel, that actually have clinical data. So that's really what some of those early companies in North America and Canada as well are up against, is that I'm always looking for a similar asset that I can get that's more de-risked, that could potentially be cheaper as well. So it's much more global these days. I mean, 5 or 6 years ago, you'd kind of look at a particular space. You'd really have a lens on kind of North America and Europe. It's not the case anymore. You got to be global. You got to think globally, and we have to apply that view for any of these kind of deep dives in areas that we're doing.
I know that a lot of early stage European biotechs are quite promptly moving even their R&D facilities to the US or North America at least. What's your view on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, our Canadian companies, that's an inevitable question that we all face as they scale. So look, Canada has what we'll say is from a purely kind of scientific innovation standpoint, we punch above our weight. Is that's what we think, the real opportunity set is in Canada. However, I think one of the challenges that we're now trying to kind of really help the ecosystem, and it's one thing that we're proud of doing, is the impact to Canada, is really trying to just build more capabilities and improve the kind of drug development cycle and bring more expertise. Try to bring folks up from down south up to Canada. Current environments may be a bit more conducive for that. Maybe I'll leave my commentary kind of at that. But we are trying to recruit some kind of experienced biotech and medtech executives back up to Canada. And it's really kind of, senior leadership. We're kind of starting to have, those repeat successful entrepreneurs. Kind of the second iteration of that now is, we've had a great run of companies in Canada, but we're still sort of building that critical mass, particularly at the mid-level, middle management, experienced scientist. We are really still trying to build that up. I think the way we're doing that is through hubs. So, antibody capabilities, incredible in Canada. Radiopharmaceuticals, we've had a number of exits there. In BC, there's Point Pharma, as well as in Ontario, Fusion, which is one of our
radio farm space.
Radio Farm, yeah. It's that's been great in Canada. I think.
What's the reason for that? Because there's obviously a lot of academic institutions that focus on that across the East Coast and Germany. Why is that standing out?
Yeah, I think it's just, we were part of the first set of companies that were, I mean, if you go way back, there's really the first gen companies for Radio Farm, but we were kind of part of that next generation cohort in Canada, and there were just a couple of really good companies that were sort of ahead of the curve, Fusion being one of them.
Yeah.
And I think Point similarly, and I think like wins, they actually lead to more wins, and so they lead to hubs, expertise, capabilities, exactly.
Yeah,
so that's all there. And I think areas like cell therapy, even though it's kind of moving more less to the ex vivo or your typical kind of autologous allogeneic CAR T, more into in vivo CAR T. So I think now we're kind of we have to evolve as an ecosystem as well on that side. But I think that's how we're sort of building it up. It's with these hubs and capabilities, like do what you're good at really, really well, and then hopefully kind of the talent and capabilities will come. That said, our company enGene, that just hit on a great readout. We've been with them, invested in them for some time. They were started in Montreal, started a Boston operation, Alpha 9, kind of our next radio farm, our next radio farm play after Fusion, based in BC, but they have now most of their operations are in Boston. So there is a time that comes that you'd likely look to expand just to take advantage of the talent that is available in the U.S. But we do try to keep kind of nice balanced distribution to make sure that we are still augmenting the capabilities back home.
How do you evaluate the inflection point when is the time to say move to Boston? And kind of firstly for biotech and then for the more like tech, biomedtech, health tech sort of things.
I think it usually is a result of necessity. Is like, I think, for when you really start to become a drug developer, that's where I think, you can do it much more streamlined with a team in the US, just because there's been more examples have been there, done that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's when you're really kind of in development, execution, building up kind of more senior leadership. I think some of that can come out of the U.S. and you can have kind of split headquarters in that way. But I would say once you're kind of past the R and you're more into the D side of things is when you likely think about that second site.
So if you were going to sum up in a 2 or 3 bullet points, what are the competitive advantages of investing in Canada from a life science perspective? What would you say?
Sure, and let's start with the positives because we'll talk about the challenges as well. But
that's what I mean, sorry, the advantages.
Yeah, the Yeah, so we'll talk about the good stuff first. So, as I said, it really does come down to just fundamental science and fundamental research. We think Canada actually rivals the best of them. I think our KOL and clinician network is some of the best in the world. I'm going to estimate 50% of companies, they have some SAB member or advisor member that's, a clinician in Canada. And so, there certainly is that development and clinical expertise in Canada. I think now what we're trying to augment is more kind of the development side, have a bit like that comes with success. So we're trying to build companies in Canada and keep them in Canada a bit longer. I think that's how you kind of will start to build up that development expertise as well. But I think that's really the opportunity. And I think, you are going to stumble upon just, it's not every modality that we're going to have a company that's best in class in Canada, but you are certainly going to find companies in specific areas that are going to punch above their own weight. We have a gene editing company out of Toronto that, frankly, we believe is the most advanced editing platform in the industry. I recognize that is a huge statement to make, because we're not out of the, Jennifer Doudna lab or Feng Zhang lab. We're, out of small, University of Western Ontario. It's not a place someone expects a transformative gene editing company to come out of, but the data is guiding towards us, having ultra high editing efficiency and undetectable off target. No one can actually claim that. So, that's a diamond. A diamond within Canada. I mentioned our Histosonics exit. We have a company sort of semi-stealth, operating a bit under the radar, called Soundblade Medical. It's out of the east coast of Canada. Again, not a place, you expect a kind of next generation version of histotripsy. It's a handheld version to come out of. But as we saw the momentum building for Histosonics earlier this year, which culminated in the transaction this summer, we made a small investment in this handheld histotripsy company out of the East Coast. Like these are just little, what we'll call diamonds in Canada.
How'd you find them?
It's
network? Or?
It's so for Lumira. So we've been around. Again, we built our franchise in Canada. We almost have a bit of an unofficial right of first look to the innovation in Canada, because you search healthcare VC and we're the first name that comes up. And so and we really try to encourage our Canadian companies to engage with us as soon as possible. We may not invest. Actually, often we don't invest right away. We like to kind of provide our companies guidance, on what we think is, the right path for them. And then we actually like to see them, execute on those and come back, basically saying they were either able to do or not do what we did. And, we'll follow companies for years before investing. We followed Histosonics probably for about 8 years, for when it was first conceived at the University of Michigan until we invested in 2019. And so, really we tell people, engage us as early as you can. No guarantee that, we'll pick the right time to invest that makes sense.
What's the typical cycle, do you think, between engagement and introduction to engagement?
It really does vary. I'd probably say kind of a couple of years out to, again, 8 years. Like it's there's some really long cycles, and sometimes we really ask for kind of a very specific catalyst. Is like, hey, ultimately we just need to be sold on the vision, and that is the management team or entrepreneur founder's vision. We just need to be sold on that, and that this management team or this individual or individuals are worth backing.
What are the key considerations when you're looking to back a management team for a company that you're currently investing in?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I've actually found that it's more kind of the intangibles. Like it's the part that you can't explain. It's just
the chemistry.
You see them pitch the first time, and it's just, you get that feeling, right? You get that feeling like, I just have to be in this company. I need to back this individual. They are just so impressed, or this management team. It could be multiple people, but hey, I just need to back this company and I need to be part of the story. Actually, that was really the catalyst for us investing in Histosonics, and this actually predates my time. So again, we first met Histosonics in 2011. We followed the company for 8 years. Never felt that it was really promising tech. Again, non-invasive, tumor ablative, high frequency ultrasound. Really interesting, but we at least felt at the time, they didn't really quite have their indication to their first proof point. That's something we were really interested in. I think they were also trying to figure out their identity, and that really meant kind of the right management. In 2017, they brought on their current CEO, Mike Blue, and then as Jerry and Peter are the leads on the deal, as they describe it, they had one meeting with Mike, back in I think it was 2018, and they said, we just need to back this guy. And so you just kind of get this feeling is like they're able to sell you on the vision.
Is that because they can, that if they can sell, maybe not the right word, but they can articulate the vision so that you can tangibly feel it, see it. Is it that they can then do that to the other people, or is it that they can do? You know what I mean?
It is. Yeah. Look, I mean that's exactly it, and I'll give credit. A couple of CEOs we invested in recently. So Joanna Stanika at Axonis. Sorry, I confused it with the MedTech, but Axonis. She did one presentation to our investment team, and we all said she's somebody worth backing. Yeah. That actually rarely happens. I'll tell you. It's not often. Jad Doucette out of Puzzle Medical, first time CEO, I think on both sides. And just the vision that they sold, they actually showed, and again, we've met these companies and seen them over a few iterations. They said that they would do something, the first time we met them. We meet them years later, and they've executed on it. So we kind of, from arm's length, obviously not being involved with the company, we see that they've hit all the milestones that they promised they would. And we also know that they're selling that story the same way to other people. It gives you confidence that, right now, syndication and depth of capital is probably the most important thing for companies. And so if
syndication is in what, more or less?
More. Like the more capital you're at, like you just need more capital right now. It's just to, like, there's going to be ebbs and flows in the biotech and medtech cycle. The more capital you have to be able to weather the storm and achieve your milestones and execute, that's essentially everything.
But aren't founders pushing back and saying, no, I want to keep ownership at some point? Or are they always trying to get as much?
You know what? I actually think for the most part, biotech and medtech entrepreneurs, at least from what we've seen, are actually quite pragmatic. Like there are some, and biotech and medtech is different that way. It's different than tech, where founders actually can retain significant ownership because valuations continue to increase over time. It's a kind of a TVPI. It's a TVPI driven industry or sector in tech, and so these founders are actually getting valuation nice step ups because it's all driven by multiples off ARR. It's different from in biotech, and the numbers very clearly show is that a lot of the value inflection happens at the very end. And so what that actually means is the founders, they know that they're going to have to raise a lot of capital to hit these milestones. That dilution, inevitably, it hits the, kind of early shareholders over time with each successive round. And so that said, I think ultimately, what we've at least seen is that those founders still have good enough skin in the game, and we're talking multi-billion-dollar exits where they're still, they still own common shares, and some of them who've transitioned to management, they're getting significant ESOP. So hopefully they've made enough, they can translate that into the next story, and then they get credit for previous successes in biotech and medtech. If you've done it before, you'll be able to get kind of a higher, at least starting valuation for that next company that you create. So that's really how, at least we see kind of, founder wealth and founder, really kind of continuity, and it's really created over multiple successes.
And I'd love to hear more about the Cancer Breakthrough Fund and why you think it's going to be so pivotal to the Canadian ecosystem.
Sure, and actually, this may be a good time to talk about the challenges of the Canadian ecosystem. So we've done actually a lot of analysis on this. It's somewhat unfortunate. So we look back about 10 years ago, capital formation in Canada relative to the US. So first, let me back up, and talk about population. So from a just pure numbers standpoint, we're about 1/10 of the US population. And so, you can't expect 1/10 GDP, but GDP is different, but It's about 1 to 10 is the ratio when you kind of just think on the macro for U.S. versus Canada. If you looked at it about 10 years ago, for every venture dollar invested in life sciences in Canada, there was about $40 created in the US. Now, where we're at today, 10 years later, is that, first of all, drug development has become much more expensive than it was 10 years ago. You likely have to raise more capital per company. Now, that difference is for every dollar in Canadian life sciences VC, there's $100 in the U.S. So the disparity is getting it's getting much worse. And so the reason for that is essentially, if you look at all of the successes in Canada, and there's a long list.
I thought you were going to say the opposite there.
Yeah, no,
I really thought you were going to say
no. The gap is actually widening, which is a bit of a challenge here. And so this is what's driving that. So if you look at all of our Canadian success stories, and I'll name a couple. Aurinia Zymeworks, they essentially made Fund 2 for us. Again, Engine is on a nice track here. Fusion, I mentioned. But we have stories like Inversago that got acquired by Novo a couple of years ago. Chinook was a fantastic exit. Let's say Trillium, Bellis, Clementia.
Oh, you were on Trillium? I didn't realize.
We weren't in Trillium. No. But that's a Canadian success story, so we're very happy to talk about that one. But there's a number of these stories that have basically resulted in, I think, aggregate, it's north of 13 or 14 billion over the last 5 to 6 years in exit value for life sciences in Canada.
Significant.
It's very significant. It's certainly punches above its weight, as is the theme in Canada. However, the issue, as I mentioned, relating to kind of the dilution and what really happens is that when you raise your Series A, because there's limited sources of domestic capital to support these companies, inevitably you end up syndicating those rounds with foreign investors. And so after the after the Series A, your cap table is 85 to 90% foreign investors. And so when these companies exit for multi-billion dollars, a lot of that capital actually flows to foreign investors rather than back into Canada, which is more likely to then reinvest. And so I think we're kind of trying to get that message out there is like, hey, we need to do a better job at actually capturing value in Canada, because then it's more likely to be recycled into
more
our
innovation, more companies.
Exactly. And so your question, sorry, question was.
So I'd love for you to tell me more about the Cancer Breakthrough Fund.
That's right. And
why that's so important to the
That's right. That's right. And so because of those
we went on a nice tangent.
We did. Yeah. We did. But basically, so what we are now trying to do at Lumira is, try to encourage different ways and try to be a little bit creative of how we bring new source of capital to bear for our Canadian companies and for our companies generally. And so the Cancer Breakthrough Fund, it's very similar to what's actually been done with the JDRF, where, it's a philanthropic organization that wants to have tangible impact for the patients that they represent. And so Terry Fox, one of the greatest Canadians, by the way, if you don't know about him, you guys should all look him up. But really, he had a mission of impacting the treatment or care for cancer and finding new treatments for cancer. And so basically the Terry Fox was formed on that mission. And so over their 45 years that they've been around, they've raised over $1 billion in capital. And so now they've partnered with us at Lumira to basically co-invest alongside us. And we've created this vehicle where they co-invest alongside us in all of our oncology investments out of our main fund. And there's also a little carve-out for early-stage Canadian opportunities. So, as well as that, we get to also tap into what is a world-class oncology network of all of the oncology clinicians that they have access to in Canada. We formed an SAB that's actually highly, highly accretive to our main fund business. So there's just a lot of kind of synergies there. And then given that it's more of there's this cancer focus, we actually get to speak to a number of the more philanthropic organizations, and it's almost a set of impact investors that where it may not quite be a fit for our main fund, but hey, it's a cancer-focused fund with Terry Fox, and that's a whole new set of LPs that we can engage. And then similarly, pharma has really engaged with us to have access to that network. And then just a number of high net worth and family offices that just they have a relative that unfortunately had or passed away from cancer, or has dealt with cancer, and so we get to tap into some kind of new networks that we didn't have before. So again, it's a way we are being creative in trying to bring additional capital to bear for our companies.
And one of your other initiatives is the setting up of the Australia strategy. Could you tell me more about why that's such a strategic play for you and Lumira?
Sure. Yeah. So, we've been working on that for a few years now. But really, the genesis of that, it stems from our franchise that we built in Canada, is the belief that, hey, we have really, really strong science, but we also, they need some help connecting, to the global markets and syndicating and, getting their story out there. And so we saw a lot of parallels to
I was thinking that as you were saying it. Yeah.
Yeah, just a lot of parallels.
If anything, more extreme, a more extreme version.
Yeah, that's right.
But also quite high in radiopharm again.
That's right. And again, I think there's a lot of, in areas like oncology, infectious disease, ophthalmology, there's been some really big wins out of Australia. Radiopharm, as you said, there's some really kind of strong innovation and a lot of great academic institutions, world-leading KOLs. Their clinical trial infrastructure is fantastic, and a lot of companies are going there.
And isn't there tax incentives as well?
There's fantastic tax incentives, and then just generally it's cheaper to run studies there. I mean, you can do them much faster as well. So savings on multiple fronts, both on time and money. And so we saw a lot of parallels, like almost, we saw Australia as almost 5 to 10 years behind what we're trying to do and what we've done in Canada. And, we really feel like, it's been our connectivity to, our peers south of the border and bringing our Canadian stories to the US that's actually really helped those companies kind of get to the next level. And we think we can play a similar role in Australia. So we have a partner there currently based in Sydney. We've got a meaningful anchor order there that we're now trying to syndicate around. So more to come on that side.
Lumira has secured $50 million to co-invest as a vehicle. I'd love to hear more in your words about that.
Yeah, sure. So actually, haven't announced it formally yet, but
you heard it here first.
Yeah, exactly. And you won't hear the name of the firm just out of respect, because I think we're both trying to close our kind of main fund strategies right now. But we've partnered actually with a global asset management firm. They typically do debt and structured credit within the life sciences space, but they've chosen us actually as a partner to do equity investments alongside us. And so basically they'll look at our portfolio and new deals that we're doing and essentially invest alongside us, and particularly in companies where there's a really strong IP thesis. So that is a crucial part of what they do, and actually value that they bring. And so we think it's win-win all around for us. It's additional capital for our companies and, aligned capital with us. It's, additional capital for our companies, obviously, but then they're also getting another value-added partner that brings something to the table that we're not necessarily experts in. And so we can rely on them for that. So the partner hasn't been kind of formally announced yet, but it will be with the closing of our Fund 5, and they're also closing a fund as well. So soon to be announced.
Great, exciting.
Yeah.
And so before we close this podcast off, I'd love to hear more from your experience and how you've seen trends ebb and flow, like you used as a very good term earlier. What technologies, whether it be medtech, biotech, what really excites you about the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I mentioned our gene editing company in Toronto. I think, look, it's tough times for that entire space, but frankly, I just have felt that, Gen 1 companies have had, known drawbacks, I think, all along. But unfortunately, now we're starting to see the manifestations of some of those as, it's toxicities in the clinic. It's kind of, that's really, there's a massive ebb and flow going on. Is like one day, in gene editing, there'll be some positive news, like, or genetic medicines, I should say.
It has to be the future, doesn't it? It's just how long it's going to take.
I think that's the kind of next big the next big frontier, and it's just a matter of time until we crack it. And so right now everyone's kind of, I think a bit underwater with some of the Gen 1, so it's a tough time. And we'll get a great read on Unicure, for example. So you got a great readout, and then FDA the next day, like couple of weeks later, kind of reverses their feedback a little bit, or I don't know. It really is ebb and flow right now. Or you're seeing some toxicity on the LNP or AAV side. Depending, people have different reservations. I think inevitably there will be a set of companies specific amongst them that'll break through. Antigen-specific tolerance, we got a company there, Core Pharmaceuticals out of Chicago. Quite excited about that one. I think generally, and what's more encouraging that I've noticed over the last year is actually pharma and biotech's willingness to acquire novel modalities much earlier. So, for example,
less so or more so?
More so, and even more so than what we saw in 21, 22.
Really?
So yesterday, the Halda transaction was announced. That's a RIP-TAC novel modality that it's kind of a little bit off of or adjacent to the PROTAC and degrader space. But this is a company pioneering, or one of the first companies in that space. They just got acquired for $3 billion after phase 1, great phase 1 data on prostate cancer. Avidity, we saw that $12 billion exit antibody oligonucleotide platform. Again, quite novel, acquired for $12 billion.
That was Lilly as well, wasn't it?
That was Novartis.
Oh, yeah.
But then, we've seen all these in vivo CAR T acquisitions over the last 6 to 8 months. Off of single patients worth of data.
It's wild, isn't it?
It's amazing, but it's really exciting in that, maybe before we would have expected, hey, for these novel modalities, pharma needs time to understand them. They're not going to acquire them right away. They're going to wait for you to be in phase 2, phase 3, even commercial to acquire the companies, and maybe they'll pay a bit more when that's the case. But what we're actually finding now is if you show the data, and even you show limited data sets, even if you're a novel modality, pharma's willing to acquire you if you just show that you are better than the current standard of care. And there's a real kind of, product profile differentiation proposition that you can clearly articulate, which these companies are. It's all on efficacy improvements and safety improvements, or, on the CAR T side, logistical. It's going to be, much more simple from an administration process to do in vivo CAR T than autologous or allogeneic ex vivo. I think that's what I think I'm most excited about, is now we're seeing a willingness of pharma to just engage with these novel modalities earlier. Because I think that's going to just drive a lot of, great exits for folks like us that are on the cutting edge. So,
and I suppose to wrap things up, what keeps you motivated, and how does it compare with what drew you to the venture world in the first place?
Yeah, that's the easiest question you've asked today. So it's all about patient impact. And I think most of us in this industry, that's certainly what gets, Lumira and our team up in the morning, is the impact to patients. So over our 2 decades, which again, I get the benefit of being part of that great team, we've had 40 plus drugs or medical devices approved by the FDA, and 7 of those over the last 2 years. And so
wow.
It's I don't know, few VCs, only those that have been kind of around that long can really talk about, their track record of impact like that. That's really, that's why we do this.
Yeah, it's fulfilling, isn't it?
It really is. And so just, these patient stories that we're hearing from Histosonics, or, some of our companies doing clinical studies right now, is just how patient lives are transformed. It's that's why you keep doing this. So
that would be a lot easier to explain to my children about what Daddy does than what I do. I had to try and pass that test yesterday.
Yeah. Not easy with the kids, but yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all your time today. I know it's hard to wean that into your schedule at Jefferies. It's been a pleasure.
For sure. No, this was fantastic. Thanks for having me. This was great.
How, for any audience members or founders of companies or CEOs, if they wanted to reach out to you, is there any particular types of companies, stages they're at, geographies, any apart from Canada, obviously. Any advice you'd like to give them to reach out?
Yeah, you know what? I think, like, look, as a VC, we really do try now, especially these days, try to be just mindful of where we spend our time. And so I'd say, look, for Canadian companies, we're always available. I'd say we are engaged in a lot of geographies and secondary geographies in the US. Like, that's where we tend to play. So those are the companies that are most likely to resonate for us. In the current market, it usually is kind of clinical stage companies. That said, we're always happy to start the conversation really as soon as you think you're ready to kind of share your story and a vision that you think you can execute on. That's really the right time to engage with us. So all of our information's on our website. You can contact me at my email is readily available.